Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Leong. I'm the music director of the Masterworks Chorale.
I'm John Sullivan. I'm the assistant conductor and accompanist of the Masterworks Chorale.
And I'm Alexandra Amati. I'm a musicologist as well as a singer in the group. And I would like to start this conversation asking uh, our musical staff, so to speak, about these coronation anthems that we're going to perform. They were composed for the 1727 coronation of George II, and they were ceremonial. They were for one particular occasion, though they've been performed at every coronation since, but we are going to perform them in a concert setting for a non-English audience. There may be some English people in the audience, but it's a concert setting. And so, how do you, why do these pieces work and speak to us, even though we are different place, different time, different country, and totally different occasion?
John, what do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, it's even though we don't have coronations per se in the United States, we all get the idea of a massive public occasion that's celebratory and exciting for everybody. And that's the kind of occasion that a great composer can really enhance by writing the kind of stirring and grand music that Handel has done in the Coronation Anthems. But I think even aside from the issue of the intended setting for it, if let's say the Coronation Anthems had just been written because he liked the texts and wanted to set things about king and queen, about a king and queen, and they had never been performed, I still think they would have immense value because the music is so good and how the music illustrates the text comes across so vividly to the listener even 300 years later.
Yeah, I agree. Any composer who is setting words is going to be giving you a musical setting, but also a musical interpretation of those words. So these powerful words from the Psalms and from Isaiah that were traditionally used at coronations in Britain really became the inspiration for all of Handel's beautiful, majestic, poised, graceful, elegant music that he provides the listener with. And he's such a generous composer. All of his ideas are direct, his musical ideas are direct, and they're easily digested. And at the same time, there's so much craft behind what he's doing, so many details that we're hoping to get across to our listeners, and also how he paints important words, how he paints the text, how he uses the text as inspiration. We're gonna try to communicate that as well. And that is, absent any occasion, this is what any composer will try to do if they want to communicate with their audience through the art of music.
Yes, thank you. And there are certain things, as music says things that words can never express. And
Mm,
there is some universal level at which music speaks almost regardless of the words. And the words can be metaphorically understood. And so they have value for us as well. As you said, we do have an idea of what ceremonial means, and we hear it in the fantastic music of Handel. I'm wondering if now we can talk about the performance practice and the way we perform these pieces. As we all know, music composed in the Baroque period sounded different. Those in Boston, we have fantastic groups that perform early music, and when we go to concerts, we see different instruments on stage, music performed with a different style, and they all hark back to this movement of historically informed performance that started a few decades ago, and that has taught us things that had gotten lost in the 18th and 19th and 20th century about how these pieces should sound. Um, Kevin, do you want to tell us a little bit what that means in this circumstance for us?
well, I think we've learned many things from the historically informed movement. It really uncovered a lot of the clarity that should be communicated in the music that maybe had gotten lost, as you said, over the centuries. Modern performance groups are generally, especially choruses, are generally larger than would have been true in the days of Handel. And so we're guessing that, for instance, the sound that would have been produced at the time would have been a leaner sound. And because there's so much uh, detail in the music, it's generally easier for a smaller group to get those details across. If we're not a small group, and I'm glad we're not a small group, it's still our duty to sing with clarity, sing with lightness, sing with enough space so that the listener can appreciate what other lines are singing when one line does not have an important line, another one usually does. And articulation that really brings out the lightness and energy of the music. Uh, that's what I would hope that we can accomplish at our performance. John,
Right.
do you
And
want to
then,
talk a little bit about? Oh, go ahead.
we're also using instruments that are more germane to the type of sound that we want to make. For example, the strings are going to have gut strings rather than metal strings, which were introduced later on as the concert halls became larger, and so the music had to sound louder and more brilliant to carry across a 3,000 people hall. Um, the brass will be natural brass, so the change of sound will often be produced by uh, the air and other features, not just lots of keys. Um, and of course, the vocal production will be different, right? As we start having compositions being performed in opera houses and huge houses, the vocal production became different and with big vibratos, which we're not doing obviously in Handel. And obviously, the change in venues that brought a change of instruments and a change of sound also brought a difference in the way in the tuning. And John, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the tuning is a related issue, as you both have implied. I think there were a lot of factors in why performance style changed over time, and I think Alexandra, you cover a lot of them very quickly. The There was also just changing tastes. I mean, the people were writing music for bigger orchestras, more winds and brass relative to the strings, and so you needed a larger quantity of strings to balance that. And especially in the sort of romantic and late romantic era, then the priority was not so much in favor of clarity and more in favor of a larger scale grandiose effect, which also had to do with the larger concert halls. And the tuning, as you say, was related to that. You want a more brilliant sound, and if the tuning is higher, it's producing more vibrations per second, and so you have a more brilliant sound. That can get taken too far. For instance, I happen to know that with more modern Italian opera in the mid 20th century, the older Italian singers were complaining like the pitch is getting too high. We can't sing Verdi at this pitch because we're going to wreck our voices. It was not meant to be sung at this pitch, and they thought that the conductors were trying to make the instrumental sound so brilliant and kind of having the singers take a back seat. Now, I'm not sure there was it wasn't exactly the same with Handel, but I do think it becomes more difficult to sing the music at modern pitch as opposed to the lower pitch in Baroque times, which was not standardized, but it was basically a half step lower than it is now. So, and I can say from experience as a choral singer myself, as a tenor, that when I try to sing Handel or Bach at modern pitch, it's a lot harder and I get tired a lot faster than if I'm singing it at period pitch. And that I think is also true for sopranos and probably also true for basses at the top of their range. With altos, it's a little bit different because often the Baroque composers were writing for boys instead of for women. And so modern female altos will find the parts uncomfortably low. But that is something that we can sort of finesse by adding tenors to it or other means. But in general, I do think the lower pitch is an important consideration, and it makes a difference for the singers, and it also makes a difference for the orchestra. I mean, the Baroque orchestra, I'm not sure they could play their instruments at modern pitch. They would have to redo the instruments pretty considerably, I think. So doing it at the lower pitch is part of doing it historically informed and with those Baroque instruments. And I think that makes an important difference to the sound.
Kevin, do you
We
want to add
mentioned,
something?
yeah, you mentioned the difference in instruments that were used, but also I just want to mention that we have wonderful Baroque instrument players in Boston. I mean, they're just everywhere because of the amount of Baroque music, professional Baroque music that's performed in our area. And the players themselves, they use different techniques, particularly bowing techniques, from modern instruments, and they just know how to play this kind of music. And we are so lucky to be able to work with them and learn from them in performing music from this time period. And they're just going to be great as well.
Right, and one of the big things about knowing the performance practice of the Baroque is also knowing what embellishments were expected and they're not notated, and these players certainly know where to put them and how to put them, and we're going to take our cue from them, I guess, more than once. Um, So as a last question, I'm wondering if I can ask you to tell our audience what are some musical features that are significant you would like them to pay particular attention to or that are significant to you.
Well, for me, Handel's music is so direct. It speaks directly to the listener in a way that I think is rare, even among the great composers. And I'm not sure you can assign a reason for that, but I'm inclined to say that I think a significant part of the reason for that is that Handel wrote a lot of operas, and he wrote a lot of instrumental music too. I don't want to imply that that's all he wrote or that's what he considered himself, but just to be a successful opera composer as he was, you have to connect with your audience in such a way that you tell the story. And I think that ability of Handel's is clearly visible also in his sacred music. So, and I think that's what makes his sacred music so special, is that it is sacred texts and it's for a big celebratory public occasion, but it has that emotional directness and drama and sense of contrast designed for big public spaces that more traditional sacred music, maybe written for a church setting like Bach's was, doesn't have to the same extent, or at least not in so pronounced a manner. That's what I think is a sort of general characteristic of the music that I think is very significant for the audience to pay attention to.
Yeah, I think you're right that in opera there's a lot of text, a lot of words in opera. In this music, there's actually not a lot of text. I mean, the number of words he's using they're not very many, and yet, as you say, John, he is able to really make the most out of those words using dramatic contrast that I'm sure he honed while writing opera, as you say, and I mean, probably the most fascinating feature is the opening of Zadok the priest. It has a very long procession-like opening, and you really can hear, the party moving down the aisle almost um, of Westminster Abbey and seeing, you can almost hear how big the building is in the way he leads up to that first opening choral entrance, which is so explosive. It is a remarkable moment. Um, that's a beautiful dramatic element, and we haven't even sung any words at that point. Uh, I also think he uses contrast. I mean, you can't be expressive without contrast, right? And in order to provide contrast, you need to change up the music, right? And in particular, in The King Shall Rejoice, another one of the anthems, um, it it only has th three movements in it, but he's very careful to make those three movements as different as they can be. The opening is so rousing, talking about the king rejoicing, and the second movement is a gracious and elegant dance, and the third movement is sort of a solemn fugue on the word Alleluia. So even in the space of three short movements, he will give you the maximum contrast he can. And to me, that is dramatic and it's expressive, and I think it's exciting for the listener and the performers.
Yeah, there's a lot of beautiful music to be had, and we hope that you will join us. There will be also some Telemann on the program, interspersed between the motets, the anthems.